All right, another vertex form example. So here we have a coefficient in front of x squared, right? We haven't seen that yet. So this one is a little different. We're going to have to factor that out, okay, of just these first two terms. So I'm going to factor out a -2, and I'm going to get x squared minus 2x, and then I'm going to leave room to complete the square, and the +1 is on the outside, right? Okay, so I factored out the coefficient of x squared, right? And do this if it's not 1. If it's a -1, or if it's anything bigger than 1, or then you factor it out. Okay, if it's just a +1, then you don't have to do this step. All right, so now I'm going to complete the square. So I'm going to take half of 2 and square it. So that means I'll have 1, right? 1 squared is 1. So then when you do that, what you have to do on this other side is you have to leave space to, subtract whatever we did. So in this case, you're going to subtract -2 times 1. Okay. So usually we would just subtract 1, right? But since this -2 applies to this one, since -1 is inside the parentheses and we have a -2 on the outside, we're really essentially adding -2 times 1 to both sides, right? And so then we have to subtract -2 times 1 to both sides, right? So essentially we're just adding 2, but yeah, that's why we have to add 2, okay? All right, so now we can complete the square there. So we take this sign, right, and we take the square root of 1, just give us 1, and then over here we have 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. All right. So that one is a little different. Definitely bring questions if you have them, or rewind the video if you need to. So here we have h is -1 and k is 3. So we have our vertex -1, 3. Right there. Okay, and then we know this time a is negative, so it's going to be downward facing, right? And let's see, our y-intercept is 1. So that kind of is consistent with our downward facing idea. And so so let's find our x-intercept. We'll set 0. Set f of x equal to 0. And we'll solve for x. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. We get -3 equals -2. All right, and then here we could go a few different ways with this. Probably the best thing to do is divide by -2. So we get +3/2 equals x minus 1 quantity squared. You can take the square root of both sides. And so we get x minus 1 on the right. And on the left we get square root of 3 over 2. So that's √3 over √2. Now, if we were simplifying, we want to rationalize the denominator, right? So we could multiply by √2 on top and bottom until we get plus or minus √6 over 2. We could add 1 to both sides. Now, technically, you don't have to do that here because we're just going to graph it anyway. So if you wanted just to keep it as √3 over √2 and plug that in your calculator, you could do it that way. So we get 1 plus or minus √6 over 2 equals x. And so we can go from there once again and just do 1 plus root 6 over 2 and 1 minus root 6 over 2, and we can plug those in our calculator. Alright, so we get 2.2 and negative 0.2. So 2.2 that doesn't match up. Alright, so I found my mistake. So 2.2 and negative 0.2, I checked that, and those are right. The problem is going back here, and this is a common mistake, and I happen to make it, is remember h is always the opposite of whatever that value is, right? You always have to change the sign there, and I didn't, so h should be positive 1. So the vertex, instead of being here, should be at positive 1, 3, which is right here, right? And that makes more sense. And so we have our axis of symmetry going through positive 1. So then we can reflect across to get our other point. So it's going to be right here. And now we can draw our graph. Okay, so there it is. So let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, sorry for that mistake. Hopefully that helps all of you to avoid those mistakes yourself. But yeah, always make sure you change the sign of whatever the term inside of the binomial is.